Hi everyone. Today I just want to do a mini rant and talk about why I think Nausicaä and the Valley of the Wind is one of the best movies of our time, and also talk about how it is more relevant. So, if you're a fan of Spirited Away or any of the other Hayao Miyazaki movies, you know that they are all absolute masterpieces of film, of art, of music. Essentially, Nausicaa has a really unique take on an environmental theme, and I really like specifically the universe and the world it's built. So I'm going to try to elaborate a little bit more on that on this video. I'm not sure I'm allowed to show clips because you know how copyright is, but I will try to paint the world of Nausicaa for you. So without further ado, so in the world of Nausicaä, we start the video and we see Nausicaa in a jungle of some sort, and we later find out that these are spore jungles. She's surrounded by these spores with a mask on that she has to wear, otherwise the spores will kill her. And she's harvesting resources from this jungle filled with insects, right? We later find out throughout the movie why these jungles are everywhere, but they've essentially made it so that part of humanity cannot inhabit each part of the world because toxic jungles are sprouting up everywhere, right? Well, these jungles are guarded by these wild, vicious insects, and it's this rare kind of grotesque beauty that I love, you know? And maybe that's just me. But as we learn more about the Valley of the Wind, the reason why the people are able to survive is because the wind of the valley helps prevent the toxic jungle spores from spreading, right? And this is like a post-apocalyptic situation where there were like 7 days of fire where the land was burned to the ground, and now the people who have come back and started settling again are kind of living a rural city life with like swords and clay huts, right? And they're farmers, they're simple folk, but they get dragged into this war when this war-hungry Tolmekian army crashes in, their warship crashes in next to them, and with it brings a bunch of jungle spores into the Valley of the Wind. So it's like the inciting incident, right? Well, we learn from Nausicaa, like, Nausicaa's story throughout the movie. I'm not going to dictate the plot to you because essentially there's a lot of war and strife. Not everything is like the Valley of the Wind, just a peaceful village. Some places like Tolmekia or Pedjite, they're essentially fighting each other. And the movie's themes, it's very clearly anti-capitalist, I have to point out, because like you should see some of the stuff that like the Tolmekian army brings to war. They have these giant metal planes, and they're so delicate, and like these 5 freight-sized warships, I'll never forget, get taken down by one guy, and I swear to God, he must have killed thousands of people, and all he does is shoot one of these gigantic ships, like pew 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 pew, and the ship explodes. It ignites. It's incredible. But the movie itself, it doesn't even just give you themes of environmentalism. It literally explains the environmentalism to you by explaining what the toxic jungle is. So we're post 7 Days of Fire, right? Obviously there's the 7 Days of Fire, everything burning. There's something there with like apocalypse, but also like global warming, right? Nausicaa shows one of her close friends, her special room where she's been growing the plants from the toxic jungle. And she finds it really interesting because she finds out, wait a minute, these plants aren't toxic if you grow them with this well water. The well water they get from deep underground. All the other water is poisonous. Well, they find out that the reason these toxic plants are toxic isn't because the plants are toxic, but they're growing in toxic waste. The water they're using to grow, the soil, all of it is toxic. And there's this line that Nausicaa said, "Who could have polluted the whole earth?" And it's so interesting because this movie was made like years and years and years and years ago. But it's not funny. I mean, we knew about global warming back then. Anyway, but it's very interesting. We find out that these toxic jungles that inhabit the earth and are essentially fighting the humans have been nature's defense systems, because while she's exploring the jungle, she ends up finding out that deep beneath these trees and deep beneath all these spores are caverns of purified water and purified sand. So the years of toxicity that they spew of these toxic jungles are the Earth's natural way of cleansing itself. And so that's why every time, historically, the humans, they wanted to deal with this toxic jungle that was ruining their lives, because it's toxic, it's filled with these insects that are violent, right? They don't want it. So they just burn it down, but then it keeps coming back, and they didn't know why. This is why. And remember, this is fiction, but right. So they can't burn it down. And Nausicaa is trying to explain this to the people, but the other thing about is how do you explain to a war-hungry civilization that thinks the answer to every problem is burn it? How do you explain peace, actually? Because Nausicaa is like, she's Girl Bossica, that's what I call her, because she's a girl boss. And she is a bit of a Mary Sue in that she can take out a whole army without even a sword. She just flips and kicks. She wears no panties. You should see the entire movie, this girl. She's full, free, breezy, easy breezy cover girl, Nausicaä. That's all I can say. But she is an amazing, amazing anime character, I would say, because there's not a lot of female anime characters. I mean, there's a lot of female anime characters. That's not right at all. There's not a lot of good female anime characters. That's what I'll say. You're allowed to dispute that. Write down below if you don't agree with me, bestie. So, again, I'm not going to go into the plot of Nausicaä because that would be spoiling a really, really beautiful story for you. But I would like... Well, I guess I'm already spoiling, like, the nature of the world. But I just think it's interesting because we also find out that, like, these violent insects that live in harmony with the jungle, they evolved to protect the jungle. Because ever since these jungles started sprouting up to purify the earth, humans weren't able to, they didn't like it, you know, despite the fact that it's the consequences of their action in this case, but they didn't like it and tried to burn it down, but the earth just, they came back stronger. So essentially, the narrative of the wise woman, she says that every time they tried to burn down the jungle, the Ohm came, and they raised civilizations to the ground, and in the corpses of the Ohm, spores took root, and more jungles spread. Because the Ohm are these giant creatures. At the beginning of the movie, we get to see a shell of an Ohm, but they're these giant, like, snail, like, nautilus, like, almost star type creatures. I'll show pictures, but they're enormous, and they're normally very peaceful, but they get enraged. We see them, when they get enraged, their eyes go from this peaceful blue to an enraged red, and they raid civilizations, and that's historically that's what's happened to a lot of humanity in this timeline. Like the Valley of the Wind is a bit of an exception, and where they're able to live a peaceful agricultural life because of their wind and because of their location. Or at least a lot of the worlds in this, or a lot of the kingdoms in this universe are at war because they're resource starved and they're unable to adapt to the new world of the jungle. So Nausicaä actually has a really, I'm going to spoil this, she has a really touching backstory. As a young kid, she actually had a pet Ohm, a little baby Ohm, and she didn't understand as a kid why everyone in her life took it from her, and they thought the insects had bewitched her. Because in this universe, these insects, not only are they enormous and do they eat people, but like they're ruining the world. Like they're destroying it. And like if we had these toxic jungles propping up with evil man-eating insects, the first thing half of our civilization would do is going into some doomsday cult about how this is the end of days, and it would be very unhelpful. You know, so we have to assume that that's what it's like in the Valley of the Wind as well. Except for Girl Bossica. Thank goodness for Girl Bossica. She just knows better, she's more empathetic, and she's more wonderful. But I just really love this movie. I love its message. I love its characters. I love everything about it. Its soundtrack, its grotesque beauty. And that's another thing that Princess Mononoke has. I mean, Hayao Miyazaki knows grotesque beauty and beauty in general. I mean, all of his movies are masterpieces. This one is just personally my favorite. I mean, there was a time when I almost considered naming myself Nausicaä. That's how much I love her. But I didn't. But I did recently rewatch that movie, so I just had to make this video. I don't know if I'll be able to include clips because, you know, it's one of those movies. But please watch it. Ultimate Girl Boss. I gotta say, it's really fun seeing Nausicaä just fly around the Valley of the Wind without a care in the world. And it's canon because it's a very windy area that she's able to take advantage of the wind. But it's like she's flying, no bra, no panties, just not a care in the world while people are getting eaten by man-eating insects. She doesn't care. It's amazing. The power of being a girl boss. I also gotta say, the men in this movie, there's one good male character in this movie. And obviously, there's not many good characters besides Nausicaä. Let's just say that. That sometimes is a problem with anime, but that's sometimes a problem with everything, right? And I don't mind because at least we get one of the cutest mascot characters ever and one of the best stories and some of the best world building. So if you liked my video, I think I'm going to end it here. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you want me to talk more about Miyazaki in the future, let me know down below.